This is TVNZ News at 8. New Zealand may have moved out of a recession, according to Treasury. Its figures for August say the economy is recovering more strongly than expected, thanks to better global conditions, higher migration and increasing confidence. But it says unemployment rose faster than it predicted this year's budget and will keep rising until next year, although it believes it'll peak at about 7.5%, not 8% as predicted earlier. Well, joining me now in the studio is Hickey from interest.co.nz. Thanks for coming in. Are these indicators right?
The economy is improving more than both Treasury and others were expecting, and we're likely to get the Reserve Bank come out on Thursday to say that the economy is going to recover faster than we expected. But this is mostly down to domestic factors and an improvement in the housing market, because this economy is not so much an economy, it's a housing market with a few things tacked on. And when confidence in the housing market recovers, as it is at the moment, as we head into the spring selling season, people are feeling good, they're starting to spend, they're starting to buy cars and the usual thing, and that is what's driving the economy again.
But overconfidence in the housing market is how we ended up in this mess in the first place.
It's like deja vu all over again, and this is what the Treasury is warning about. It says that we've not corrected the imbalances we have in our economy, and that we seem to be going back into the same old thing of spending a lot on property, investing in property, and not investing in our exporting sector. Remember, we've got a current account deficit, we're still borrowing heavily from the rest of the world, and we need a better export sector so that we can continue to pay back that debt and service the debt.
But that's not a surprising mentality, isn't it? Everything else failed, let's just go and buy houses again. That's pretty much what it comes down to, isn't it?
Well, that's right. There's a whole generation now of savers who have been burned by the stock market all over again after what's happened in the last year, and are also wary of the likes of finance companies and very low interest rates in banks. So the first thing they do is look at the housing market, perhaps putting their money into a rental property, because there is such a big tax advantage still for doing that.
Let's talk about it. How big a tax advantage is there, and how much of a part is that playing in our current financial situation? It's effectively a gaping loophole, isn't it?
That's right. And a large chunk of the middle classes, those baby boomers with some cash to spare, have jumped through that loophole, bought investment properties, pushed up the price of property in the last 4 or 5 years. We've got some figures out today from the tax department showing that those people with what they call LAQCs, loss attributing qualifying companies, have used those to claim $2.5 billion or so in tax losses. Now that's a big chunk out of the tax base. Now we have the tax working group set up by Bill English and John Key, which is looking at whether to close those loopholes. Next week it will have a big discussion about whether or not to bring in something like a capital gains tax or a land tax, or quarantining in some way those losses on rental properties from income. Because what people are doing is claiming losses on the rental properties and then reducing their taxable income when they go to the tax department. It reduces their tax overall.
OK, so you're saying housing is definitely not the way to go. You've mentioned exports before. What else should we be doing so this recovery is more sustainable and doesn't get us back to where we were 18 months ago?
Well, I think we do need a comprehensive tax reform which brings in flatter, simpler tax systems, and that taxes those capital gains in some way in the property market. I think we also need the Reserve Bank to look at how it makes sure that banks don't lend too much to land and to farming. Remember, in the last 9 months, banks have lent an extra $6 billion into the property sector and into farming, whereas they've reduced lending to businesses by $3 billion. That shows you what's happening in the economy. We're becoming even more imbalanced, more into property and land, less into the productive sectors.
So what should Alan Bollard be doing? Should he raise it?
Well, actually, I think he should be raising interest rates. Remember, part of the reason the housing market is firing up again is that we've got the official cash rate at a record low of 2.5%. We've gone from 8.25 to 2.5 in less than a year. We need to get those interest rates back up again to send a signal to the housing market that if you want to change the way the economy works, one way to do it is to say interest rates are higher.
Just finally, we are in for a credit rating, not from Standard & Poor's, but we are in for a credit rating shortly. Should we perhaps be downgraded? Would that help things, do you think?
Well, that would be one way to slow down the economy and to get this housing sector perhaps back into the box. By Fitch downgrading New Zealand's credit rating and sending a signal to international investors that, hey, we actually have the second highest debt levels as a percentage of GDP in the OECD. Compared to Iceland, we're the second worst in the world. Why is it that we continue to have a credit rating that's very high when others have not?
All right, thank you so much for your time. Bernard Hickey from interest.co.nz.